For the sports lovers out there who like to get their gamble on, whether it be on the NBA games, NFL, Major League Soccer, even National Hockey League, Major League Baseball, even college sports, go to BetUs.com to make that bet. If you use the promo code TKT for the Klown Times, you get up to 125% of the sign-up bonus, which is up to $2,500. Another perk you can see, you can bet on the go, which means you can bet anytime, anywhere on your mobile device. You get fast payouts, so you can get your payouts immediately every single time. Do not have to wait. And you can do live betting when you can bet during the game, whether it's early or the best lines, you can do it all. So anyway, please sign up for BetUs.com. Use the promo code TKT for the Klown Times. You'll be able to do so, right? Check out BetUs.com, where the game begins. We're going to tonight's realignment edition of the Klown Podcast. I'm Scott Burks. Please check my sports blog out at www.theklowntimes.net. You see it here. So www.theklowntimeslikethis.net. That's Klown spelled with K. And you also can find me on Facebook as well for your laptop, smartphone, desktop, wherever you are, where you may be. Just type it up in Facebook. Find me there as well. Also, please continue to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the YouTube channel, the Klown Times YouTube channel. I have over 460 subscribers. So again, I celebrate small victories. So my goal is, as I mentioned every podcast, is get to 1,000 subscribers by year's end. So I'm well on my way with that. So please continue to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Even if you have some bone to pick with me, state that too. I mean, I'm petty too, so I could go back and forth. We'll have some fun with it. But anyway, just like, comment, share, and subscribe. Hit the bell button so you get notification whenever I pull up more podcasts or more or other content. So I'll be glad you did, and eventually you'll be glad you did. And one last thing, speaking of which, get the merch at cafepress.com, search for Klown Times Sports. That address will be in the description when I upload this to YouTube, so you'll find the gear there as well. You want hats, sweatshirts, T-shirts, mouse pads, whatever. Just go to cafepress.com, search for Klown Times Sports. You find the gear there as well. So I mentioned the college realignment edition earlier because y'all heard the news. So to break that down, so how this affects the conference of our youth, the Atlantic Coast Conference. I have my guys back on here. You know who they are. Jeff Fan, as well as Matthew Warner, both guys from this ACC Sports Blog, the All Sports Discussion. So, gentlemen, welcome back.
We're happy to be back. Thank you.
Yeah, glad to be here.
You got it. So I teased it earlier, man. Realignment reared its ugly head yet again. Man, I mean, just when you thought you heard it all, you've seen it all. I mean, it's one thing for Oklahoma and Texas to want to go to SEC. That's kind of understandable because technically they're in the South, albeit the Southwest, but they're still Southern states, right? So you kind of understand it, and aside from the from the brands, acquire more popular brands, everything else, I get all of it. What I still do not get, you got two LA colleges, universities in Southern California, UCLA, joining the Big Ten and acceptance into the Big Ten for 2024 season. Two Los Angeles universities joining a Midwestern conference. By the way, who also has members called Rutgers and Maryland on the East Coast. I wonder how those road games are going to be with their Olympic sports. But anyway, so why are we talking about the Big 12? Why are we talking about that when we're ACC guys? Because obviously it's going to have a big effect on what the Atlantic Coast Conference decides, or how it affects them, the status going forward. So that's why I got you guys on. And I know you're going to break down. You're going to, as always, educate me because I'm just a blowhard. I just think I know stuff, but I really don't. So anyway, Jeff, I'm gonna throw it to you, brother. You saw what happened. Mm-hmm. If you're ACC commissioner, Jeff Phillips, what are you gonna do? What are you thinking about?
I mean, the first thing, and I'm sure he's already done it, and since nothing happened, I'm sure we already know the result. And the first thing you always do when something happens is you call Notre Dame and
Right.
hey, saying, is this the you want to join the ACC? But Jack Swarbrick already came out, the Notre Dame AD. He said they're going to stay independent as long as they can.
Right.
And I mean, in a weird way, I kind of respect Notre Dame. I mean, like you already said, you got West Coast teams flying across the country to play in a Midwest conference, and teams from the Southwest or in the Southeastern Conference. I will say Notre Dame, they're going to stick to their tradition, being independent as long as they can. And they could have made millions more dollars moving to a conference at any time in the last 20 years,
Right.
but they didn't. In a way, I kind of respect that. But once you make that phone call and that doesn't come through, your options are kind of limited. I mean, they're gonna have to be creative. He's gonna have to be thinking outside of the box. Right now, there's rumors. The rumors are just crazy. They're all over the place right now. Could they take a handful of Pac-12 teams and be the all-coast conference? The more likely scenario that I think is out on the table, and as I understand it, they're kind of putting evaluations together, is a TV merger with the Pac-10, Pac-12 schools, where they utilize the ACC network and create scheduling agreements with the Pac-12. I don't think this is going to be game-changing money, but when you're in the position the ACC is, more money is more money. However,
Right.
you can get it. The other thing that's on the table, and the UNC chancellor, hinted at this yesterday, that ESPN was looking at possibly restructuring the ACC's television deal, and
Oh, wow.
I don't think they're gonna restructure it to the point where it's gonna be Big Ten SEC money, but
Right.
I feel like ESPN has a number of reasons to try to keep the ACC as a viable conference. I mean, they just landed Comcast as their last major distributor for the ACC
Right.
network
seen
last year,
Yeah.
and the ACC network is a profit maker for ESPN. I mean, it makes estimated $5 million for each ACC school. That's probably going to go up after Comcast joined up. Might be 7, 8, I don't know, $10 million per school. Well, ESPN gets the other half. That's like $100 million right there a year they're making off the ACC network.
Mhm.
They don't want to necessarily just bust up the whole thing. It doesn't make any sense.
Right.
And why are you going to move properties, for example? Tell SEC to take Clemson and Florida State. You already own the TV rights to Clemson and Florida State.
Right.
So why are you going to suggest to the SEC to take those two programs, for example, on properties you already own, and pay a higher cost for them than what you're paying for them right now? It doesn't make any
It
sense.
doesn't make any sense. So basically what you're saying is, do they pay, for the SEC network, do they pay more per school, ESPN does, than the ACC?
I think they probably pay a little bit more because of
Okay.
the carriage fees. They were able to get higher carriage fees for the SEC network, and then their base contract is more. So you would basically be swapping properties you already own to a higher rent district, which doesn't make any sense. Just pay the ACC a little bit more money,
Right.
pay them more money, and you can keep all of the properties together, because the first thing you do when you bust up the ACC, the Big Ten is going to be coming for properties that you own.
Right.
And so I really think ESPN has a vested interest to try to keep the ACC together. And I do think there is something brewing with a restructuring of the TV deal. I don't know what it's going to look like exactly, or the increase of it. But I feel like they're going to do something, to have a softer spot for the ACC.
Yeah, that's interesting, because to hear you put it that way, in that manner, man, I hadn't heard that, as far as Like that's like taking the same property, moving to a higher rent district. That makes a lot of sense. So basically, as the saying goes, follow the money, right? You gotta follow the money in this case, because why would the ACC take something that's viable, a very viable property at ACC, not as profitable as the SEC, obviously, but still a viable moneymaker nonetheless? Why would they ruin it? Why would they ruin something that's making money off of? That just doesn't make good.
Yeah, and then you open yourself up. You bust up the ACC, and it's almost a guarantee that Notre Dame is going to the Big Ten. So you're going to tell the SEC, hey, take Clemson, Florida State, basically giving the Big Ten and Fox, Notre Dame, and probably North Carolina, and 2 or 3 potential other schools that you own. It just doesn't make any sense why ESPN would. They keep saying ESPN and Fox drive the bus. It doesn't make any sense at all why ESPN would push the SEC right now to expand with ACC teams, because they already own them. I mean, the wild card is Fox and the Big Ten. I mean, they could, swoop in at some point, but even I consider that very unlikely, because this grant of rights deal, it's tough. It's going to be tough to break.
Yeah.
And if I heard some comments from the AD at Miami, Dan Radakovich, he basically just admitted that today that, hey, Oklahoma and Texas can't get out of their grant of rights with 2 years on it. Nobody's getting out of the ACCs with 14 years left on it.
Right, exactly.
I mean, maybe we can look at it when there's like 5 years left or 6 years, but I would be absolutely floored if an ACC team left in the next 5 years.
Okay, before I throw it to you, Matthew, for those who, I'm just going to say, for those who don't know what grant of rights are, Jeff, could you explain quickly what grant of rights are and why it's significant in this case?
Yeah, I mean, basically, the conference members have turned over their television rights to the conference for the duration of the television contract. And if they go to another conference, they give up those television rights. And I think also so you have all those television rights right now for the ACC, it's somewhere like $35–40 million, times that by 14, and 3 times, I think it's 3 times the operating budget of the ACC as an exit fee, which some people estimate as like $100–150 million. And for a team to get out of the ACC right now, I've seen estimates anywhere from $300 million to $500 million, and your TV rights. Nobody's leaving the ACC right now. I don't believe it. Clemson's not joining the SEC in 2024 or something like that. I would be absolutely floored if that happened.
Yeah. So I know it's funny to see Twitter lawyers or Twitter experts on grant of rights when they obviously don't know what the hell grant of rights really are. If that's the case, to your point, Oklahoma and Texas would have been gone from the Big 12 with only 2 years left, right?
Right, and they said Oklahoma, I think they said if they were to leave right now, they would owe $80 million. But 80 million is a lot less than 300 million.
Yes.
And they said it's untenable for Oklahoma to leave. Now they might work something out so they can leave like a year early or something. But I mean, it wasn't like they had a decade plus on the deal.
Right.
I mean, that said, and this is kind of to your original question, what is the AD Phillips going to do? Well, and Matthew wrote a really good article. I mean, he's on the clock now. I mean, just because he's got years where his conference is going to be stable doesn't mean he can't start. He has to start looking into solutions like today.
Yeah.
Because eventually someone will challenge it. It just won't happen in the next probably at least 5 or 6 years. So you have to start working on it right now.
Right. Because if the money gets us even more stupider, if you will, is that even a word, for the Big Ten, for example, and like whenever their deal, like I think it may be finished renegotiated as far as we know, is delayed it because they did not split up Southern Cal and UCLA to the Big Ten. I've heard and read that it's going to be upwards average 100 million per school.
Right. Yeah.
That's stupid money.
That's crazy. I mean, how many more I mean, you can only build so many more buildings, and what are you going to be paying coaches like $25 million a year?
Yeah,
They're
exactly.
going to be paying more than NFL teams can pay their teams and programs.
Well, hell, they'd be like NBA players, almost like their
Yeah,
salaries.
exactly.
But anyway, Matthew, man, Jeff and I, we touched on it, like the schools that the ESPN does not want to risk losing to Fox. I mean, the Big Ten. So basically, if you're Jim Phillips, which schools are you talking to right now? The priority, the desirable schools, if you will, in your conference. Which schools are you going to talk to right now, Jim Phillips?
So let me clarify what you're saying first. Are you asking which schools do you want to have come join you? Because let me follow up just on a couple of things. First
Sure.
of all, I was very, very happy that you said at the front of the broadcast, I was very happy that you asked your listeners to come back to you and say what you disagree, what they disagree with you on. I'm glad that you did that, Scott, because I remember my professor saying one time at Virginia Tech that even if they say that they're disagreeing with me, that means I'm relevant.
Yeah.
you know what I mean? That means they're listening to what I have to say and they're reading what I have, what I have to write. You know what I mean? So I'm glad that you did that, because
cool.
I mean, that's what, even if they disagree with you, they're listening to you. You know what I mean?
That's
that sort of thing. And that's a good thing. So you also said at the beginning of the podcast that, bringing USC and UCLA in, you guys both know that when you add UCLA and USC, you're bringing them into the Big Ten at the state who would be the 5th largest economy in the world if they were their own country. That's California. Right. And so you're bringing in a boatload of eyeballs to a TV contract where you can change it and just make a boatload of money for the conference. And that was the big attraction big attraction there for UCLA and USC for the Big Ten. I mean, that's why I thought that happened. Now, in terms of Notre Dame, what I've read about them is that it would cost them, Jeff, you can probably verify this for me, but I think they're in a little different situation with the grant of media rights fee. Theirs is probably a little less than other ACC schools because they have obviously their football isn't with the ACC. The NBC's got their football contract, so theirs would be about $100 million, I think, if they exited. I think that's what I read the last time. And I think the Irish know that they're in a really good spot because the NBC contract for the Irish expires in 2025, right? So they're going to have a few more options, and they're probably the most attractive option on that realignment table. So yeah, absolutely. I guess if I'm the conference commissioner for the ACC, I'm trying to figure out ways to bring them into the fold, and Jeff referred to my article earlier from All Sports Discussion. I mean, a few years back, I was going through this because like when you get hired from Northwestern, right, you come to the conference, you've seen what happened in the last year you've seen what happened with Oklahoma and Texas. You want to come to that job with a big plan. And I wrote about strategic planning at All Sports Discussion there because I actually, when I wrote that post, Scott, I actually looked on ACC and strategic planning, and I just did a simple Google search, right? And I found out that the last one, this is just crazy. The last person that wrote an article about the ACC and strategic planning was a Virginia Tech doctoral student in 1985.
Wow.
And it's crazy actually. And it was on, they wrote it on whether higher education administrators at each of the AC schools at the time, which obviously was just smaller than it was now in 1985, right? The original 8. And, whether they're using the tools of strategic planning and things like that. He found out that they weren't, and that they, made recommendations that they should start using them. And he hasn't and I recommended that, if somebody's doing further research right in this area, they probably go back and find out today, wow, now are the ACC administrators of each of these schools using strategic planning? And therefore if you extend it further, are the ACC administrators in Greensboro, are they using the tools of strategic planning in this era that we have, which is changing, as with conference realignment, that sort of thing? Because he's like we have said, he's on the clock, and you got to come to the job with these big ideas. So like, if you're asking who would I want to add at this point in time, right? I mean, Notre Dame's your big fish. You want Notre Dame in the fold. I think that's option A, B, and C. And then if you're finding somebody else, you probably, I say West Virginia, right? But I look at the media markets, and I probably would go with what Jeff said earlier about having this a coastal sort of conference play, because if you look at the eastern and the western seaboards in the United States, right? Yeah, lots of people that live on the coast, and having that arrangement, that TV arrangement, may actually work out good for us. But Jeff, if you have any thoughts on who you think should be added other than what I mentioned here, I'm all for hearing it, Jeff.
I mean, ESPN doesn't really, and Fox, they really don't release their valuations on other programs out there. So it's hard to know if there's other schools that have enough value to actually expand to. I mean, I think if you were able to somehow get Oregon and Washington, that would add value. But
I was thinking the same thing.
I just don't really see that they're going to expand. I think the way that they're going to try to go, at least here in the short term, is to try to be creative with their television contract.
I agree.
Yeah. You say agree. So here's my thing with that, though. As much as I want to believe it, I'm a pragmatist. So the pragmatist side of me is saying Notre Dame ain't joining the conference anytime soon. If they've been knowingly leaving money on the table for how many years?
I think I've heard at least 20 years they've been leaving money out on the table, and their NBC contract is coming up in 2026. Right. I mean, they're probably going to get like a tremendous deal from NBC.
Yeah, there you go. So, and plus their alumni is how much, is how big and supportive, and the networks is how deep. So again, see one thing right quick first. I told y'all this before, but like I think it was 2016, 2017. Yeah, 2017. NC State went up to play Notre Dame at South Bend, right? So I had tickets, scored some tickets. I took my family up. When I drove on the campus, I mean, it's so different from the town of South Bend itself, even though it's really a town called Notre Dame, but it's considered South Bend. So I tell you, when we took the show, the campus, because you couldn't really park on campus, it's like, oh, it's like, it's almost like angels were singing when you pull up on campus, like rainbows, because gold brick buildings, the stadium was even more spectacular in person. I mean, I was like, screw seeing touchdown Jesus. I just want to see the stadium, right? Because it was so, you could tell the place had money and lots of it. You could tell that Notre Dame has an alumni network that is deep pocket. So really, they're good. No matter what, they are financially and resource-wise good. So if you two hadn't had a chance to see Notre Dame's campus in person, or go up there to watch football games or whatever, it's a must-see. Not only for the atmosphere, but just to see how well financed and resourced that university is. They don't have to be in the, I'm not saying this to be flip. They don't need to be in the conference. They got money. They're deep pocketed. You can just see it. And the NBC contract you both alluded to earlier, it makes it even more. I mean, they are good. The Notre Dame Fighting Irish are good. they're good. They're good. So that's why I'm saying that I don't know if, and plus Notre Dame has all the leverage right now. They can sit back and observe.
Of course. Well, of course, you asked me who I wanted. Whether they want to come is a different story.
Right. Exactly. That's a wish list for everybody, right, in the ACC. I just think, to your point, Jeff, going back to you quickly, about ESPN not wanting to lose a net viable property to Fox Sports, which is obviously was back in the Big Ten. Notre Dame is that last fish, to your point, is that major fish. ESPN does not want to lose Notre Dame to Fox. They do not. So it's interesting, just like you said, guys said earlier about the finagling of the existing ACC contract. They have to make it to a point where it's hard to say Notre Dame, hard for Notre Dame to say no, if that's possible. They have to make them an offer that they cannot refuse, right? And I don't know how it's going to happen. It may be, and this opens up a new can of worms, Jeff. It may come in the form of uneven distribution. Since football is driving the bus, like, for example, I mean, you can believe that folks at Clemson and Florida State are wondering, why the hell does Boston College get the same amount that we get? How come, even though Wake Forest made the conference championship game, why do they get the same cut as we do? They're not the brands, we are, right? And Carolina could be in the same bunch as far as the big brands. It's like, people know Carolina basketball. Why? I'm picking on Boston College, but why is Boston College getting the same type of monetary shine as we do? So maybe maybe Notre Dame too. So maybe it's going to take Jim Phillips saying, you know what, even though he probably doesn't want to do it, and it typically doesn't work out well, see the Big 12, right, with Texas, with the Longhorn Network, and eventually what came of the Big 12 Conference, is that that's something that he may explore as far as keeping his top brands happy. Because let's just be real. People talk about Clemson and Florida State being the big, and Miami being the big brands. I think, Jeff and Matthew, you said it earlier too. I think the biggest of the brands is Carolina. Because Carolina has a more national fan base, especially in Carolina basketball. And they got the Jordan brands, they got the flashy black blue uniforms. They're it. If you take Carolina away from the ACC, it's all but diminished. You know, more so than you would think. And Florida State too, for that matter, but especially Carolina. So if you were Jim Phillips, how would you try the uneven distribution approach? How would you try to, is it even worth discussing at this point? Should you just throw stuff at the wall? So what gives here?
I think if you're Jim Phillips, you are at the point where you just throw stuff against the wall and see what comes out. But I think you can't do it in a way where it's like, you know, this program is more valuable than this other program. For example, like the way the Big 12 structured it with Texas, and you know, got Nebraska to leave 10 years ago. I think you can have some level of uneven distribution, but it has to be like performance based. Like if you're Clemson and you make the college football playoff, you get like a $5 million bonus or 10 million or something like that. Like the amount of the television contract should be equally distributed among the schools, and then you can reward them for performance, like ACC champion or, you know, Sweet 16s or something like that. That I think if you're going to do it, that would be the way to go. Because then, you know, the underperforming schools, you know, have incentives to get better, and, you know, the better performing schools will be rewarded, but you don't make it so uneven that, you know, you're starting right out of the gate. Because, I mean, what happens if, I mean, we see what's going on with Wake Forest right now. I mean, I think anyone would say that, hey, they're probably one of the 4 best football programs in the conference right now, but they have a small alumni base. And I mean, they have a small alumni base, and, you know, they're probably not national TV draws, but Why would you, penalize them right out of the gate, because they might not look as valuable on the surface, but if they're performing well, I mean, I'm not saying Wake Forest is going to go to the playoff, but I mean, they have a team that finish in the top 15. That's worth a bonus to me, but you keep the base contract the same. That would be the one way I could see it working, but I wouldn't, base it on like perceived viewing habits and, worth of the program or something like that. I would make it performance based.
Right. That sounds like a good idea. Let's see. I almost lost my train of thought. No. Okay. Matthew. Okay. I had a plan. I had a little mini podcast last week when the news broke out about the whole thing, I think the ACC could do, or how the Pac-12 could save itself as well. And among the ACC block that I had, I was like saying at the time, before I was able to digest everything, it's like, if I'm Jeff Phillips, I go to Stanford, Cal first, and say, you know what, guys, in Oregon and Washington, and say, you know what, guys, you four fit the academic profile of our school, but you also bring us new markets. You want to get back at the Pac-10? I mean, at the Pac-10, at the Big Ten rather. Let's make this a Power 3. Join up. Let's go. Right. That's what I was thinking about earlier before I could fully digest. Now, whether that's still viable or not, I don't know. I'm sure Jeff Phillips is thinking about those things. That's why he gets paid the big bucks. He's smarter than we are. All three of us, definitely smarter than me. So, basically, Matthew, that the idea of becoming the third of three, not the third of 4 or 5, the third of 3 at this. You got to think at this point. If you, Jeff Phillips, how does my idea sound to you, or is it even feasible at this point?
I think I'm going to go back to what Jeff said earlier, that I think you're in a better. I really don't think they're going to add anybody right now, Scott. I think they're going to just try and see if you can set this scheduling arrangement up, that Jeff talked about earlier. I think he and I have been nodding heads in agreement on a lot of issues tonight. That's probably why we work pretty well at allsportsdiscussion.com together. So, I mean, I think let me just say the other thing. I think Jeff was absolutely correct about the revenue distribution issue. I mean, I think you do that based on performance. Otherwise, you find a lot of angry partners, like it didn't work well when Texas was pulling their muscle in the Big 12.
Cool. That's
and you find a lot of resentment from a lot of parties if something like that happens. So I think Jeff was absolutely correct about that too. So I think you're probably just more in a position of trying to strengthen that sort of TV relationship. And I think you probably could make modifications to the TV contract if you set up a series of scheduled games. Let me throw you an example out, Scott, that I threw to Jeff. I would love to see Virginia Tech play Washington on a frequent basis, or at least over a 4-game schedule sort of series. I would love to see Clemson play Oregon over a 4-game series, that sort of thing. I would, love to see Pittsburgh or NC State, either one, play Stanford over a series of 4 games. And I think if those sorts of non-conference matchups are set up on a home and home sort of basis, perhaps you're getting rid of it, those FCS games, or at least 1 or 2 or something like that. Maybe just one, but you have an ACC Big 12 sort of,
12,
series. Sort of that you have with, basketball, like the Big 10 ACC, you know what I mean? But you do that with football, and you generate some interest and some income through your relationship with ESPN like that. And then, like Jeff said, you potentially have a a rebranding of that ACC, maybe not a complete rebranding, but a partial rebranding of that ACC network.
Yeah, I agree with that. That sounds good. See, that's why I have you guys on here, because you're much smarter than me when it comes to this stuff, because you're much closer to this than I am. I'm just a fan of the ACC, growing up in ACC country. So, but you guys study it far more than I do. So again, thank you for that. We'll get y'all out here on this one. And I'll start with Jeff and Matthew. You guys come in and finish this. You peer into your crystal ball, right? You add some Miss Cleo type shindig, right? And you're asked to peer in the crystal ball and think, look 7 years ahead of time. Choose 7 years because 7 is lucky number, right? So 7 years in the future. Jeff, what do you think the ACC looks like in 7 years from now? It could be from additions or whatever. So what do you think the ACC looks like 7 years from now?
I wish you would have asked for 5 years.
Okay.
Because I feel confident in 5 years, but beyond that, 7, man, it's really it's tough because you just don't know how the deals will be restructured. You know, if
Right.
someone might decide to challenge the grant of rights at that point. I feel confident, you know, you're not going to see a whole lot of movement in the next 5. Maybe they could add some teams or whatever. I think that ESPN will restructure the deal. Okay, it's obviously not going to be the same as what the SEC and Big Ten make, but
Right.
I think it could put them in a arena where they're at least in sight. I think in 7 years, I think the ACC still does exist in its current format with the current teams, possibly with a couple of others. But it's just so hard to see what ESPN may put together beyond. But I feel like they're gonna try to put something together that's gonna put at least through the next 7, 8 years, 10 years, you know, and get them closer to the end of the current contract. That's gonna make them more comfortable. So if you're really saying, well, what do you think is gonna happen? That would be my guess.
How about you, Matt? And you know what, Matthew? I'll make it easy. Instead of torturing Jeff for 7 years, I'll make it 5. So 5 years.
Okay, well, I agree with what Jeff said, Scott. I mean, I think I'll probably go a little deep, maybe a little more deep on that. I mean, ESPN also, I shouldn't say more deep, but more detailed, I should say. ESPN isn't, they're not going to go out there and say that, you know, we want the it's not to their benefit to have an uncompetitive two conference league for the country to watch, right? For ESPN, for the Big Ten and the SEC, because if that's just all it is, and you have a certain number of teams that are competitive on the TV screen, that's going to get old pretty quickly for the nationwide viewer, and they're going to lose interest pretty quickly. And so I think they also have a vested interest in a competitive product, at least, you know, to a degree, I think. You know, and so I think Jeff is right that they'll try to, you know, the Big Ten and the SEC got a much, you know, did get a head start, right? So they're going to be ahead. They're going to be ahead of people in revenues, but I think ESPN will at least try to make an effort to narrow the gap. Not substantially narrow the gap, but to narrow the gap so that they don't ruin a competitive product for America. Gosh, I sound like I'm really hammering ESPN now, but that's, I mean, it's in their interest to not do that.
Right. I agree with that. So here's what I think is going to happen in 5 years. You're going to call me crazy, but here's what I think is going to happen. It won't happen right away, but I said 5 years. So in that time frame, I think Jim Phillips is going to go hunting. But it's not who you think it is. It's not going to be, I don't think it's going to be they're not going to have the coast to coast league. I think they're going to sneak in and get the Big 12. I think they're going to and remember, this is about matchups and like properties, right? Appealing matchups. For that reason alone, I think they're going to get West Virginia. Bring back the Diamond Rivalry game with Virginia Tech, bring back the backyard brawl with Pitt. And they're going to bring in Cincinnati. I think because again, content, matchups, properties. Both those schools are Fox properties because the Big 12 is a Fox, well, is predominant Fox property. Get those two cats because now you get a national rivalry with Cincinnati, with Louisville. You get a national rivalry with Pitt, the Ohio rivalry. You also get that rivalry with UC and West Virginia. Not only that, with Cincinnati, you bring in the Ohio market. You bring in Columbus. You bring in Cincinnati. You bring in Cleveland. You're going to bring all that in because now it makes it more appealing to people in the tri-state here in Cincinnati or most places, a lot of places in Ohio outside of maybe Columbus, to get it, to get the network. And that's a big, Cincinnati is a major, it's not big market, but it's a major market.
I don't think that's off the table.
So
Absolutely
again,
not. Yeah.
Call me
agree.
crazy. I can
No, I
say
agree
crazier
with you.
things, but
I agree.
yeah, so we'll see. But it's nothing like talking about college conference risk in this.
Yeah.
You're familiar with the risk of the board game. But anyway, Jeff, Matthew, where can they find you out on Twitter? I know I asked you this, but I just want to be sure people can find you on Twitter. So Jeff first, and you, Matthew, where can I find you on Twitter?
Yeah, you can find me at Talking ACC Sports on Twitter, and the blog that Matthew and I have our podcast. You can find that at allsportsdiscussion.com too.
Cool, Matthew.
Our site Twitter account is at allsportsdacc. Again, that's the site Twitter account for allsportsdiscussion.com. My personal Twitter account is at HokiesMash_ASD.
ASD, there you go. Not LSD, but ASD. But anyway, thank y'all for tuning to the next podcast. Thank you to Jeff Fan. Thank you to Matthew Warner from All Sports Discussion, the ACC Sports Blog. Please check them out. It's a great blog, especially if you're in the ACC, if you're in the ACC sports like I am. And also, please continue to like, comment, share, subscribe to this video. Check out my website, www.theclowntimes.net. Get the merch at cafepress.com, such as Klown Times Sports. Those links will be in the description, as well as to the ACC's the All Things Discussion Sports blog. That link will be in the description as well, so you can check these guys out as well. So thank y'all again. Until next time, take care. Have a good weekend. Peace out.
Thank you for letting us on here. Thank you for letting us on.
Yeah,
You got
thanks
it,
for
brother.
having us.
As always, thank you.